Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak podcast, available every morning on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. It's Wednesday, the 6th of November here in London. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Welcome to our US election results special, where Donald Trump is leading in the states declared so far, winning North Carolina and Georgia, as Kamala Harris's path to potential victory narrows.
All eyes are now on the blue wall swing states of Pennsylvania, Wisconsin and Michigan.
The dollar and Treasury yields surge on Trump's rising presidential prospects as the Republicans also secure a majority in the Senate.
Let's get to our top story.
In the presidential race at 6 a.m. in London, Republican Donald Trump has 246 Electoral College votes and Democrat Kamala Harris 210. A candidate needs 270 to win. The Associated Press says Donald Trump has won in the swing states of Georgia and North Carolina. In the other key battlegrounds, with 90% of votes counted in Pennsylvania, Trump is leading 51% to 48% for Harris.
Meanwhile, in Wisconsin, with 85.1% of votes counted, Donald Trump has 51.4% of the vote, Kamala Harris 47.2%.
And in Michigan, with 60% of votes counted, Donald Trump is leading 52% to 46% for Kamala Harris. Former President Trump has already won states including Texas, Florida, Ohio and Iowa, while Vice President Harris has taken California, Washington, New York, New Mexico and Colorado.
Now, Pennsylvania's 19 Electoral College votes may be key to the overall result. It was a major focus for both candidates during the campaign, and Governor Josh Shapiro has been pleading with the public and press to be patient for results.
Counting millions of votes accurately, it takes some time. Our goal is to get it right.
Governor Josh Shapiro speaking there. The state was won by Biden in 2020 and Trump in 2016.
Republicans have gained control of the US Senate. Right now in the Senate races, the Democrats have 42 seats, the Republicans 51, giving the GOP a majority. Democrats faced a difficult election map, defending 3 seats in states Donald Trump won in both 2016 and 2020. Here's Bloomberg's Joe Matthew with a breakdown of how the Republicans did it.
This is not a big surprise after the motion that we have seen so far in the states tonight. All they needed were 2. We told you that in the outset. Pretty easy to do the math here. It came from West Virginia, Jim Justice winning the Senate seat there held by Joe Manchin, and Ohio, Sherrod Brown losing to Republican Bernie Moreno. That's what we have here. That's how tight the margin is.
Joe Matthew points out that no Senate Republicans were up for re-election in states that Joe Biden carried in 2020. In the House, the Democrats have 151 seats to the Republicans' 183.
Markets are reacting to Donald Trump's rising presidential prospects. At 6 a.m. here in London, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is up 1.3%, with the greenback surging against all major currency pairs. The S&P 500 E-mini futures are up by 1.1%. 10-year US Treasury yields have also surged 17 basis points to a 4-month high of 4.44%. Many investors see Trump's pro-growth stance on industrial policy, corporate tax cuts and tariffs boosting stocks, fueling inflation and therefore keeping interest rates elevated. Jay Poloski, principal and founder at TPW Advisory, says markets are behaving as expected given early results.
Given that the market is thinking that it's going to be a Trump win, the market is doing what one would expect, right? Dollar rates up, dollar up. The thing that surprises, though, there are a couple of surprises, right? One is small caps. Typically, when rates go up, small caps go down. Small caps were up 2% today, up 2.5% or so in the future. So that's almost a 5% move in 2 days.
Jay Poloski from TPW Advisory speaking there on Bloomberg Television. Meanwhile, the Mexican peso, the emerging market currency most sensitive to a win for Trump, has tumbled more than 3%. The euro, yen have also slid, as well as Eastern European currencies like the Hungarian forint and Polish zloty. European stock futures are now down 0.6%.
Bitcoin has hit a record high, rising by as much as 8%. The digital asset is currently trading just shy of $75,000. Bloomberg's Danny Berger says many are looking to the betting markets to explain the moves.
This is a betting market that is pricing in near certainty that Trump will take this thing home. Overall, the Trump odds on Polymarket are at a record high, just about 89%. All of that is leading to crypto, to Bitcoin markets that are going further and further.
Berger adds the cryptocurrency is seen as part of so-called Trump trades, with markets using it as a proxy for betting on a Republican win. The price of Bitcoin has risen by more than 70% so far this year.
And if we return to the voting results for a moment, 10 states are also voting directly on abortion rights in this election. A Florida ballot measure to shore up abortion rights in the US has failed, according to the Associated Press. With 57% of support, the measure fell short of the 60% threshold required for keeping in place one of the country's most restrictive abortion bans. However, pro-abortion rights ballots measures in New York and Maryland, states typically protective of reproductive rights, have won, according to AP.
Now we'll take you through the latest results and market reaction in a moment, but if you're finding the wait for a final result tough, there's a lesson from our opinion columnist Mary Ellen Class this morning talking about that election results take time and to be patient. She was a State House reporter back in 2000 for the Palm Beach Post when America had to wait 36 days for the Supreme Court to rule on the election results. She says that lessons were learned from that time. Florida improved its election system to avoid the same sort of problems that befell that vote, and she points to the fact that now more than 95% of all votes in the US are casting their ballots on verifiable paper. Florida has made its process more standardised, clear, recounts are seen as being fair. And she says, look, voting takes time and it takes resources, and be grateful that America learned lessons from Florida in 2000.
Yeah, and we do understand, unlike perhaps some European countries, not actually a nationwide vote in the US. Different states have to, of course, tally up all of the votes that they've received. But at the moment, Republican nominee Donald Trump is leading Democrat Kamala Harris in the race for the US presidency. And so to discuss, we're joined by our senior editor, Bill Ferries. Very good morning to you, Bill. Counting continues. What is the latest? What do you make of the results so far?
Yeah, for sure, counting continues. But if you are, if you've been gathered at the Trump headquarters at all this evening, it's been probably a good night for you. It has, through the course of the results pouring in, there have been a lot of little nuggets of good news for the Trump campaign and not a lot at all for the Harris campaign. So we've seen a couple states, or we've seen one state, Georgia, that Joe Biden won in 2020, fall to Donald Trump this time around. So that was a very close win for Biden back in 2020, but it's definitely a bigger win for Trump this time around. But I think the big news that we're looking at right now, and again, none of these states have been called, but there's this so-called blue wall of states that the Harris campaign always targeted, and even this evening said was like their main path to victory. All of those states currently leaning pro-Trump at this point. That could switch, and it's a matter of 100,000 votes or 200,000 votes. But with, in some cases, 90% of the vote in some of these states, the cushion is disappearing very quickly in what had been seen as must-win states for the Harris campaign.
Okay, so a very narrow path, or a narrowing path to potential victory for Kamala Harris there. What about what we've seen elsewhere in the races, the Senate going to the Republicans as well, and the latest from the House?
Yeah, the Senate has flipped over right now. The Republicans have 51 seats for sure in the Senate. The Democrats have 42, so that leaves 7 seats out there still to be decided. Montana is a big one, where a Democrat, John Tester, has been facing a tough Republican opponent. The House is a different story. There's still a lot of votes to get counted before. It'll probably be days before we know the final makeup of the House. But the House was seen as having better prospects for the Democrats after 2022, in which kind of some mismanagement in New York primarily, but also in California, kind of left them with some weaker candidates. So they actually, the Democrats, even if things don't go the Dems' way nationally or in the Senate, the Democrats could still could flip the House, which would be kind of an interesting turn of events. In that case, you'd have potentially Republicans at the White House and the Senate, but Democrats in the House. So divided government, and oftentimes markets seem to prefer that.
In terms of the exit polls and voter turnout, what do we know about the priority of US voters in this election cycle?
Well, certainly the economy remained a major issue for voters today, although a surprising number, given what we had seen before Election Day, said that democracy was also an important thing to them. I think on the exit polls, though, we have seen generally Harris seeming to underperform among groups that, even when she wins, she's not winning by often the same margins that Joe Biden won by in 2020. It looks like Donald Trump has successfully made more inroads with Black, with Hispanic voters, and may have a higher turnout among younger men than we expected beforehand. So, again, there's going to be a lot of parsing in the days ahead, and we don't have all the numbers in. But in general, you see, I think, Trump exceeding some of the pre-election day expectations and Harris falling short.
Okay, Bill Ferries with the latest, our senior editor. Thank you very much.
Now, markets also responding to the initial results favouring Trump, with trades linked to a Republican victory. Joining us now to discuss is Bloomberg TV anchor Kriti Gupta. How big are the moves then in the dollar, stocks and treasuries firstly?
They're pretty enormous. I'll go asset class by asset class if you'll indulge me here. We'll start with the futures picture. Green on the screen for the U.S. equity futures, not so much for European futures. You're seeing a major divergence here, higher by about 1% on the S&P 500, about the same margin of a drop in Euro Stoxx 50 futures, which really tells you that the U.S. outperformance story is crucial. I will caution all of our listeners, though, to associate that move in the stock market with any particular candidate's potential win. And the reason I say this is because if you look at some of the positioning data and some of the way the markets have reacted in the last week alone, a lot of this may have kind of positioned some of the stock market to rally regardless of the winner, kind of removing an overhang, which is, of course, the major U.S. presidential election. So that already was kind of in the works, again, regardless of what you're seeing. What I think is shocking here is that the stock market is rallying in the U.S. from the futures perspective in line with the dollar. And that's an inverse correlation that really matters for international investors, because the more expensive the dollar gets, the harder it is to access the S&P 500. And that's why this move in the dollar is so crucial. The stocks, the currencies, that are suffering from that dollar move are the euro. You're at a 107 handle. That's pretty natural. But also a lot of those kind of Eastern European currencies are taking a hit as well. Even some of the Asian currencies seeing some substantial weakness. And that's where you can start to see that perhaps that Trump trade is getting priced in more aggressively. The idea that the defense aid to Ukraine, the defense aid to NATO, or even some of the kind of trade effects on the likes of China, Japan, Korea are all going to be a potential source of weakness. You're already seeing that priced into this market. You're even seeing it in the commodity space with copper and oil also taking a hit.
Kriti, of course, we don't have a full result yet. And as we're just hearing from Bill Ferries, although it's a very narrow path to victory that Kamala Harris has, it's still possible. How much should we draw lessons from what happened in 2016 when Donald Trump's win was a big surprise in terms of trying to parse what's behind these market moves? So,
again, to your point, we're not there yet. We could be very, very, very close. And the reason you're starting to see these markets have this reaction is because the map, especially in some of those swing states, when you go county by county, is looking very similar to what you saw in the 2016 win of Trump. Not the 2020 win, but a lot of the states and the counties that Biden had flipped in 2020 have now flipped back to kind of Republican control. And it's not just in the presidential election, it's in the Senate race as well. And that's where you've seen a lot of the Republican control come forward.
Okay, just lastly, how volatile has trading been overnight in Asia and now into the early morning in Europe? All of these figures accurate to 6:15 a.m.
It has been fairly volatile. Not as much as expected, though, that you've seen the Asian side. And I'll give you just context here. You've seen moves of somewhere between 2 and 3% in the Asian session. That's pretty in line with a volatility move. What you're seeing a bigger move in is the futures picture. Euro Stoxx 50 futures don't drop by 1% unless there's a major geopolitical overhang. This is that moment.
Okay, Kriti Gupta, Bloomberg TV anchor, thank you very much for talking us through the market moves at just about 6:15 here in London. This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast. You can keep up to date with live coverage across Bloomberg's platforms throughout the morning and throughout the day. Bloomberg Radio, television, and of course online and on the terminal as well. Thanks for joining us. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.